Hello everyone, I'm Pacchia and this is Bloomberg Law on Demand. My guest today is Paul Maco. He is a partner at the law firm Vinson Elkins based in Washington, D.C. In a former life, he ran the Office of Municipal Securities at the SEC. Today we'll be taking another look at the financial challenges affecting state and municipal governments. Paul, thanks so much for coming in.
Lee, thanks for asking me. It's great to be here.
So it seems like the general consensus for the last 2 or 3 years regarding state and municipal government budgets has been that things are not great. In the last 2 or 3 months, however, it seems to have diverged between one camp that says things are very, very bad, almost apocalyptically bad, and not so bad. What lies ahead in 2011 for state and municipal governments?
Hard choices. I think that puts me in between the two. I don't think that the dire circumstances that some see are quite out there, but what is ahead for state and local government officials are some very, very hard choices that they have to make among constituencies that are used to not being on the receiving end of those hard choices.
Do you see a political will, I guess is the best way to put it, out there among the political class to make those decisions?
Yeah, that's always a good question. I think we're seeing that in instances where the governments have their back up the wall. I think Illinois has demonstrated some of that. The degree to which that is successful is a story that is going to unfold in the years ahead. But I think that human nature being what it is, those choices are postponed as long as they can be postponed.
Of course, referring to the state income tax increase, something like 60% for Illinois citizens. We also had a story out today from Bloomberg News saying that certain cities have been actually increasing budgets in light of what's happening these days. What's to make of stories like that? I mean, these were just large cities we're talking about, not small municipalities, but is this a trend that you expect to continue for long? Or?
Well, the question really is, what are the increases in the budget for? Are they replacing aid that formerly came from the state and is of the sort that really is necessary for their citizens? Or is it something that is a little bit more like the old generous times when times looked easy?
The tension points between local governments and state governments. There seems to be an interesting dynamic between the two. When local governments encounter fiscal turbulence, it seems to have an interesting effect on state governments on the other end. What to make of that?
Well, a lot of people aren't familiar with this kind of granular idea, but local governments are basically creatures of the state. Most of them, except for entities like charter cities, are created by the state legislature. They can be dissolved by the state legislature. Their powers and so on do come from the state level. About a generation or so ago, when New York City encountered its difficulties, a model of local government assistance corporations was put into place in many states, particularly in the East and the Midwest. And that is a focal point for exactly the type of relationship that you mentioned, where there's an opportunity to push the decision-making process into that body at a certain level and away from the local politics.
Are state governments getting it right, in your opinion?
I think those that have faced the music are. I think some of them are coming up to the music, and it's going to be an interesting year. I know that some of the states had, as many budgeters do, all sorts of gimmicks. This has been 3 years in the hole now, if you will.
Right, we've been following this story for quite some time.
Right.
Many people are asking me, when does that crescendo start to manifest?
Well, I think most financial officers have run out of their gimmicks, and now, to the extent that there's a structural divide, or at least a long-term difference between expenditures and available resources, they're facing it.
It should also be pointed out that not all states are in such hard times. Which ones, in your opinion, are in best shape, and which ones are really coming up on that critical mass?
Well, rather than single any out myself, I'm a lawyer, not a financial analyst, but I'll refer to a few that have been in the news. Of course, there's been a good bit in the news about Illinois. There's been a good bit in the news because of the leadership position taken by Governor Christie in New Jersey, who's put it front and center on that state's political plate. It has been a matter of discussion in California. Of course, New York State. Governor Cuomo has posed an austerity budget that is going to be facing a very interesting time this spring. There are other states, such as Maryland, Virginia, others that are faring the crisis fairly well. And that's an important thing to remember. We have 50 different states. They all shouldn't be lumped into the same basket.
I want to talk a little bit about the regulatory front. We've seen some major changes in the way the SEC is doing business these days. How has that impacted the way state governments can borrow funds?
Well, one focus the SEC has been, particularly since last summer's enforcement action against the state of New Jersey with respect to its pension disclosure. That has sent an alert to other states to make sure that their pension accounting is a little bit more up to snuff than perhaps it had been in the past. We've seen reports of those changes in some other states. So I think there's an interest exhibited by the SEC that's forcing some action. I'd also say that this current environment, particularly the outflow or the retreat by the retail investor from the municipal market, is something that's not lost on the SEC. They're always looking for tangible evidence to point to justify giving them more authority. A lot of time many times in the past it's been in the theoretical because we've been a very healthy economy when the issues have been addressed. This is a different time, and I would expect that the marketplace should not be surprised to see the SEC attempt to make the most that it can of the current turmoil in the municipal market.
Another story out by Bloomberg News today suggesting that Moody's will now include unfunded state pension obligations in their assessment for the credit ratings for the states. How do you expect this to change things? I
think it's going to be interesting to see precisely how they do it. It's helpful to include it. It certainly is an indicator of the overall weight that is on a state's shoulders. But pension obligations are a little bit different than notes or bonds that have a fixed maturity. They're the sort of thing that, and fixed principal amount, I should say, too. They vary with a variety of different economic circumstances and can be stretched out over time. So some sensitivity to that, differentiating their nature from that of a fixed payment with an absolute deadline would certainly make sense.
So how big an impact is this going to have on a particular state's outlook?
Well, I think it ought to shed at least a bit more light. This is an area that is often confusing and differs from state to state, since many states follow differing practices in reporting on their pension obligations.
Taking this picture in total, how do you expect things to play out? Are we going to see defaults this year from municipalities and state governments?
I don't think you'll see it from state governments. I think states, we've only seen one historically, that's Arkansas back in the 30s. We will likely see some smaller municipalities encounter some difficulty, perhaps seek protection under Chapter 9. I think you're going to see a lot more workouts. You're going to see municipalities moving into the welcoming arms of these local government assistance corporations, where they might be able to sort things out a little bit more and perhaps gain a little bit of a boost in willpower.
That's Paul Maco. He's a partner at the law firm Vinson Elkins. If you'd like to learn more about the issues we just discussed, go check out our offerings on BloombergLaw.com and on the Bloomberg Terminal. I'm Pacchia. Thanks for watching.